Good afternoon, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Qing'an Chen, the Director of Polio Academy for Interdisciplinary Research, or PAIR. And today is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker, that's Professor Alex Mihailidis, who is also a PAIR Fellow, and he had been giving many talks before. The last time was, I believe, 1.5 years ago. So welcome back. And Professor Mihailidis is Barbara Stemmis Research Chair in Rehabilitation Technology at the University of Toronto, where he also served as the Associate Vice President for International Partnership and the Scientific Director of the Intelligent Assistive Technology and Systems Lab. He is also the Scientific Director of AgeWell, the Canadian Technology and Aging Network. With over more than decades of expertise in the clinical engineering, particularly in the pervasive computing and intelligent systems in health, Professor Mihailidis leads the interdisciplinary research at the intersection of aging, artificial intelligence, and assistive technology. He designs and develops a range of tech-enabled systems and tools for different groups of end users in healthcare, including elders, children with autism, and nurses. Professor Mihailidis collaborates extensively with researchers worldwide, and of course, including those at PolyU, to develop impactful technologies and bring them from lab to market. So Professor Mihailidis is widely credited for his distinguished contributions to education, science, and international academic collaboration. In 2022, the United Nations recognized him among the Health Aging 50, a group of global leaders working to improve the livings of the seniors. Most recently, he has been conferred the Knight of the Order of the Academic Palms by the French Republic, a very prestigious French national order that honors individuals for their eminent services to education and scholarship. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Mihailidis.
Well, thank you so much for that very kind introduction and for having me back here. I come here so often. I'm very soon going to run out of things to present about and to talk about, because the frequency of the trips to come to visit PolyU seem to be getting more and more. And I think that's just a sign that our collaborations and our partnerships are growing, which is wonderful to see. So it's always fun to come back and see familiar faces and meet new people and see so many students and young people in the audience as well. So what I'm going to talk about today is some of the work that we've been doing over the past year with respect to supporting older adults from a variety of different aspects, right? From activities of daily living and self-care activities to rehab as well. And when I talk about rehabilitation in my presentation, I'm going to use it in a very general sense, because in my lab and at the Toronto Rehab Institute, the hospital where I'm also a scientist, we see rehab as a spectrum. It's just not something that happens after someone becomes injured or after they have a stroke or after they've been diagnosed with some kind of chronic disease, but rehab also includes prevention. And that's where AgeTech and technology really can play a very large role, as I'll talk about, and that is in finding out things about people before they actually happen so that we can put the right interventions in place. So why don't we go ahead, and I apologize, I'm ahead of myself on the month. It's not December yet, but it is getting close to December. So yeah, we're looking into the future here a little bit. So I realize it's middle of the day. We're all probably a bit tired. I'm a bit jet lagged still, so I basically put my conclusion slide first, um, which I like to call the bottom line up front. And so if you take anything away from my talk today, just watch this one slide and then you can take a bit of a break. But as I mentioned, again, when we talk about rehabilitation, that includes prevention. With older adults, particularly, it has to become very personalized. It has to be proactive and ideally tech enabled when needed. And I'm not talking about replacing therapists. I'm not talking about replacing caregivers or family members, but technology can help fill the gaps in the prevention of various things that could happen to older adults and in the support of them during various activities. As I mentioned, rehab must also include prevention. And then again, as I just pointed out, age tech must complement, not replace human care. Now, for all this to happen, at least in Canada, and as I travel around the world and learn, for all these things to happen, there really has to be a systems level shift is needed to scale innovation because the practices and policies, as I said, speaking from a Canadian perspective, are just not there. We do not yet have the ability, the coordination, the funding, the people to implement a lot of these changes that are required to do the things I'll be talking about. And towards the end of my presentation, I'm going to talk about a new initiative that we've implemented that hopefully will help to move systems level change forward and do some thought leadership. So, in terms of rehab, as I mentioned at the start, it goes well beyond recovery. And, this really needs to include the prevention of decline, maintenance and function, and most importantly, enabling of independence. And that's really what we're here about and why we develop various types of technologies for older adults is to help them to stay in their own homes and communities for as long as possible, prevent them from having to go into an institutional care facility and ultimately, we want them not to have to go to the emergency room and go to the emergency room and be readmitted over and over again. So we really want to provide this care as much as we can. And again, use these technologies not to just to monitor what they're doing, but to predict before things happen to them. It's fantastic that we can detect when a fall happens in an older person and get them the help that they need. But ideally, we want to prevent that fall from happening. And again, technology can help us do that. So what I'm going to do actually is present to you four projects. I think four. I have 3 or 4 projects that we've been working on over the past year. And the interesting thing about these projects is these are all examples of research projects we're doing collaboratively between the University of Toronto and companies. And so these are all industry-based projects where they're all startup companies that either we have spun out of our lab, and it's mainly been my students spinning out these startup companies, or they're companies that have come to us to support them. So these are all really nice examples of how we can actually engage in that knowledge translation, engage in that translation of technologies and intellectual property right away in these projects. And I'd have to wait, several years to go through the research itself and then to engage in those practices. So the first project is about sensors for falls and safety. And essentially, this is with a company of actually kids, because they really are kids, that just came out of high school. And so in Canada, that means they're all about 17, 18 years old. And I'm going to share a story about them, which I just love, and hopefully you'll love as well. But they came to me wanting to really solve that problem of not only detecting falls, but how do we predict falls? How do we provide the support for early intervention in remote monitoring? And specifically, how do we design this with older adults and caregivers in mind and with them at the table? And so these kids came to my office one day, again, 17-year-olds, saying, we're putting off university because we really believe in this startup company. And as I mentioned, I said, that's fantastic. What's your experience with older adults? And they had those personal stories of their own grandparents. And I said to them, well, you need to learn more. You need to go out and understand your customer base. Technologically, these kids were wizards, right? They could go and program these things and they built predictive algorithms, et cetera. But they didn't really have that knowledge of older adults and caregivers to begin with. So what they developed was a brand new company called Synopsys, And what they wanted to have in there was really three parts to it. So first of all, this was meant for retirement and nursing homes, so not in-home use, but not long-term care. So not fully institutional care, but kind of that in-between level. So they have three different systems in there. The first is an in-room voice assistant that they call Glenn. This is almost kind of like your Google Home or your Amazon Alexa, but trained specifically for older adults and for the context of living in these facilities. And so they trained it on language models and speech corpuses that was specific to older people. Because again, typically these systems don't work for older adults as there's changes in their voice and changes in their language patterns, etc. They then had a waist-worn clip-on sensor that they designed that you can put onto someone's piece of clothing. It's completely washable, can go through the washer and dryer, and it's safe, and that allowed us to collect data about the person was doing. And then the piece that they also developed, but has really become the crown jewel of their company, is this all-in-one health data insight tool. So essentially, they developed a platform that provides the predictive analytics to the care staff to say, well, Roger in room 3 is really showing a trend that he may trip and fall in the next week. And so the care staff then is able to take a very holistic approach, calling the occupational therapist, the physical therapist, the SLP, whoever is needed in order to put those interventions in place. Now, again, they presented this to me. I said, that's fantastic research, but you need to learn about your population. And so normally when I say that, my students will go and set up some meetings with older adults and caregivers. Instead, Rishi and Ian actually moved into the nursing home, and they lived there, and they're still living there, and it's been over a year. So they actually became residents themselves, living among their customers. And they spent Christmas with them last year, and they celebrated birthdays together. Um, and it really gave them that insight into what was happening, and they're able to watch their technology working as well, and able to see all the errors that were happening and everything else. So this is kind of one of those stories where they really dove deep because they really believe in this product, and because of this interesting way that they went about things, they really have captured the audience of the customers that they're trying to sell to. And right away, the retirement home signed up as their first customer and now has bought the first batch of technologies from them, and away they go. So they're being successful. I guess they're being more successful because they're still living in the nursing home, and they live there free of charge, right? And so I'm like, hey, more power to you guys. You're getting free rent, free board, free meals, and having a good time and watching your technologies go forward. So they're really, really invested. So if we look a bit deeper into their technology, again, the whole thing was what they learned is really needing to take a holistic approach to things. And that was just, looking at things from a variety of different angles. So again, as I mentioned, they have the in-room voice assistant. The interesting thing about this is it not just gave information to the person, but it also helped with nighttime detection of activities, because not only did we have sensors on the person, but the in-room voice system could also hear different sounds. So if there's also sound like a thud on the ground or something middle of the night, it would pick that up and assume maybe something wrong has happened here. The person has gone out of bed, but it would also listen for calls for help, or even things like snoring, sleep apnea, et cetera. So it really kind of became a very holistic device just based on this one little technology that you see there. As I mentioned, then we had the detection to collect more type of sensor data. So based on this clip, we were able to get gait patterns, movement patterns, which rooms the people were in, etc. It also had automatic fall detection, and this was fully integrated into the systems of the nursing home as well. And this is one of the really important things that they found out, that the nursing staff there and the clinical staff didn't want a whole separate system from the electronic health records that they were already using. And so they really had to work hard to integrate things. And when we talk about the analysis, this was one of the big things. Again, it couldn't be a separate system. It couldn't be a separate app. It couldn't be a different computer screen and monitor. It all had to be integrated. So they worked hard really to make some data flow that not just works for the health record that this nursing home uses, but one of the general ones now used across Canada in order for this data to flow into that. And what this was really powerful, because now you're augmenting the typical records that are normally manually entered by the nurses with this predictive data as well. And so again, the nursing staff had a really good picture of what was happening with each of their clients and each of the residents there, and again was able to implement different interventions as soon as possible. So that's that project. The second project is the Remindful project, and this is again a startup of one of my students. She's a master's student. She's going about her startup a little different. She's doing it as a not-for-profit foundation. She's developing the technology, the software, making it all freely available, all online, community-based, that people can download, use it, build their own sensors, even if they wanted to, and then actually add to the libraries. And what Remindful is all about is really about supporting older adults, perhaps with cognitive impairment, to remind them of the daily activities that they need to do within their own homes. So this is not specific cueing and prompting, where we prompt a person through the steps of doing something, but those high-level prompts of, take your medication, time to, go prepare your lunch, and go take the dog for a walk, have you attended your medical appointment, etc. But again, she went one step further. And what she did was, collected this data, as I'll show you, and again, put that predictive aspect into it, or behavioral anomaly detection, as she calls it. So looking for changes in people's behaviors that, again, will predict the changes or predict changes in someone's chronic disease, level of cognition, again, predicting potential for falls, etc. Now, in the background of this, you see a bunch of Post-it notes, and it's interesting that this is how this project kind of started in my brain many, many years ago, until I found the right student to take it on. Is if anyone here has taken care of an older person with dementia, typically the most advanced piece of technology we've used are Post-it notes, right? You stick these stickers everywhere in that person's house, reminding them of their medication, remind them to lock the front door, etc. And so in my mind, I said, well, why can't we make electronic Post-it notes that you can easily stick up anywhere in the house that can provide these reminders that caregivers can easily change, etc. So that's what the Remindful project is. Essentially, our electronic Post-it notes, electronic stickers that have sensing capability to provide the reminders that older people need. So again, this was a co-design project. So she didn't go and live with people. She had an advisory committee, in this case, of older adults and caregivers who not just looked at the product afterwards, but co-designed it from step one. And in fact, they're actually authors on her papers. And that's really what we try to strive for in co-design. Now, again, what this is are location-specific, very inexpensive devices, again, mimicking that whole notion of putting up a sticky note somewhere with a message on it, and that's kind of represented by the red square. So you can stick these things anywhere you want in the house. You can send messages, as I'll show you in a second, and then you can take them down and relocate them in the home as well. And the plan here is once we start to mass produce these things, then they'll be really inexpensive. You can buy 20 of them, and again, it's all open access, open source for the person to work with. So here's an example of, this is just showing it kind of right now we're just using very small tablets as the sticky piece. But again, there's a Remindful app that a caregiver or caregivers would have. And what that allows you to do then is to send these messages and change the messages and the types of messages to the various sticky devices within the home. So in this case, they've added a picture of the dog. It says, take Sam on a walk. And then you'll see there's also kind of a little check mark for the person to check that they've completed it. Now, this device also has various sensors built into it. So for example, it has proximity sensors. So it will recognize if I walk by it, and then all of a sudden it'll turn on if there's a reminder to give me, and try to catch my attention so that I turn, look at it, walk up to it and look at it. It then has a close range proximity sensor so that ideally from that we can infer that the person has read it, and then hopefully they push that okay. Now, as a person's cognition continues to diminish, there's no guarantee of that, right? And so we're working on various other ways of providing that feedback. Now, the nice thing about this product, though, as well, is, as I mentioned, it can be a variety of caregivers that are taking care of that person can be part of using this app itself. And so once the person perhaps progresses far along enough in the diminishing of their cognition that these reminders no longer work, the app is still useful because it then becomes a coordination tool between the various caregivers. And I know this as well. My parents in the early 90s, my mom has dementia. Me and my two older sisters try to coordinate care for them, and it's ridiculously impossible for some reason. And so that's what this tool is meant to do. So it's kind of a lifelong tool that just doesn't end when the person no longer is responding to the reminders themselves. And again, that came directly from the caregivers who were part of her design team that said, well, hold on a second, can it also do this for us? You're already taking our information, we're already interacting with it. Why can it not help to coordinate us as well? So again, in terms of notifications that may go to the caregiver, if there's a missed reminder, if there's some kind of concerning response, if we start to see a gradual decrease in the person's interaction with the devices, again, this is all notifying the caregiver. So again, some kind of intervention can be put in place. So I already kind of talked about these potential use cases, but obviously this is about reducing caregiver burden, the reminding, caregiver coordination, as I mentioned. And again, because it's collecting now all this data about the person's movements, the activities they're completing, we have a very nice record of what a person does in their day. And the next step now is taking this record of all this data we're collecting it and feeding into some predictive algorithms in order, again, to have that prediction piece as well. One person actually has started to take their data to their family doctor and actually show them the doctor the data that's collecting to show the changes in their health. And some family doctors, this particular one found that very helpful. Some still don't. That's a whole nother presentation to give. But again, what we try to do is present the data in a way that would be useful to a clinician. So it's not just a bunch of numbers, being scrolled on a spreadsheet, but again, something that helps then the clinician to make some kind of informed decision beyond what they would typically do. Third project, this actually was a bit of a pet project of mine that I worked on over the summer, where, this comes from the whole notion of there's so much technology out there, but does it actually work for people? And how do we know, who would actually benefit the most from technology? Because again, you don't want to give a system that's giving prompts and reminders from seemingly the walls and the ceiling to someone who has more advanced dementia, suffers some delusion, et cetera, because that's just going to make the situation worse. So how do we actually now take all the work that we've been doing, all these various technologies, and somehow translate this into some more accessible and actionable resources that can be used by people to determine whether that piece of technology actually should be used? And so what we did here is we developed some predictive models that can help identify older adults who would most likely benefit from the use of technology or age tech, as we call it here. And as this was a very early study, what we actually did was we did this all in simulated data. So we took all the data we've collected over all the years, we developed a simulated data set of, I think, about 300 older people, and then kind of their characteristics as related to their clinical status, but also in terms of their use of technology. And again, simulated data, but based on real world data. So it was fairly accurate. From that, we developed these machine learning models and then we trained them. And again, the whole goal here is to develop some kind of decision-making tool that will support caregivers and family members in terms of determining whether a piece of technology would work. So we actually then came up from various tools that are out there, 10 simple questions that an older adult can answer or their caregiver can answer that helped us collect 18 features that we trained our models on across these 4 different areas that you see there: demographics, health and cognition, social support, and tech readiness. And so taking these features, we trained our models on the training set. And this is kind of an example of the output that we had from our model. And And what you see here is, we would put in this information, we would ask the simple questions, we would hit the predict button, and then it would output what the person's risk level of using the technology was, and the key factors in terms of why it was a low risk factor or a high risk factor. And again, a high risk factor means that the person wouldn't benefit from the technology, most likely, and a low risk factor is that they would. Again, what we found, though, is out of those initial 18 features that I spoke about before, the ones that were most predictive are the following three here. So if an older adult from the questions indicated that they had some type of digital literacy, and in the brackets, those are just the names of the clinical tools I already verified that we use to collect some of this information. So if they had some kind of digital literacy, so they've used the computer, they've used a cell phone, they've used a smartwatch in the past. If they have a willingness to use technology, and most importantly, if there was someone there to support them in using the technology, to install it, to take care of it, to maintain it, those are the people that would benefit the most. Now, you look at these results, and this is not rocket science, right? We probably could have predicted all of this. But what this just validated now is that through a machine learning model that we're able to get the same things that clinically we've probably known for a long time in terms of things to look at. And then secondary factors were things like cognitive status, obviously their level of mobility, and if they had internet access. And the internet access is obviously very, very important, because if they don't have access, then none of these tools are going to work for them. And again, that's a whole nother conversation. So the final project is one that I did this past year that when I was on research leave in Spain. And this is with a startup company out of Barcelona. And this is something that we called synthetic memories. And the goal of this was around the whole notion of reminiscence therapy, right? So reminiscence therapy is you sit down with a person with dementia, you get them to tell you stories, right? You show them pictures of their childhood, you show them videos of things and activities that are familiar to them. And clinically, this is shown to have outstanding and positive results for people with cognitive impairment. Reduces agitation, reduces depression, doesn't improve cognition, but shows that, a person becomes more cognitive aware. And, if you want to see some amazing videos, just look up reminiscence therapy or music therapy on the internet. And there's videos of people who are completely locked in, haven't spoken, don't talk because of their level of dementia. They hear a song and they get up and they start dancing. It's quite amazing stuff. Now, the problem is sometimes these pictures and videos don't exist. These memories as a visual do not exist. So can we, by talking with the person or talking with their family, have large language models, things like ChatGPT, generate these memories synthetically so that we can then show them back to the person? Okay? There's massive amounts of ethical questions in this. I realize that. There's a lot of things that we are still looking at. This is a brand new project, but showing great promise. So instead of me talking about it, I'm just going to show you a video for a couple of minutes that kind of shows you what's happening. And the thing I want you to keep in mind is every photo, every video that these individuals are looking at, and these are real people with dementia, are synthetically generated through the algorithms that we've developed. So I'll just play the video here.
I don't know why it came into my mind, but obviously when I was a little boy, I used to be able to remember the steps for dancing. And there was a sort of garden party or something, and I remember a great green meadow, and I was there dancing. Well, I never was very elegant in my movements, but I think I just remembered what to do.
Synthetic memory is the reconstruction of a personal story, of a memory, into an image or a video using generative AI. And this project works in the intersection between arts, technology, and community, with the aim to help people dignify and recover parts of the past that have been lost.
You're sort of going into detail that I haven't thought about for decades. I can't recapture the image, I'm sorry. Let me just think about it for a little while.
Sure.
It's gone.
We are somehow entangled with our memories. And when we start to lose grasp of these memories, we start to lose a bit of ourselves. There is a small part of ourselves that is lost. A synthetic memory always starts as a conversation. It can start asking questions such as, what is your earliest memory? Or what was your favorite hobby?
Do you have a memory of when you went skiing?
Yes, I have, but I've sort of lost most of it. I remember beginning very badly, and I didn't have any lessons, and I used to lean back.
And from there, you start to jump through the conversation until you find a moment, a story, something that can be illustrated through an image. And that moment, the prompter starts to prompt it, starts to create a definition, a description of the image. Later on, you show the image to the interviewee, and then there is like this memory exposition.
What about this one?
Needs to be out of focus.
Yeah.
That's meant to be me, is it? I'd have worn a helmet.
And today in the workshop with Eduard, it was really interesting to explore how someone that is going through this journey through dementia could clearly say, no, that was not exactly how I remember it. There were moments that he could actually click with something, and then he will say, but I was wearing this helmet. What is more relevant is that this could be a really interesting tool within a space of therapy, which is called reminiscence therapy.
The reminiscence therapy is a technique that's been used for many, many years with older adults with dementia and other cognitive impairments. And basically what it does is it encourages these individuals to tell their stories to people. And what the research has found is by telling their stories, they actually have quite positive impacts on their cognition and their memory, and also on things such as their mood and their emotions.
Well, we went to Gibraltar, and on the first night I remember there was a Spanish group, and I remember the song they sang. I went da 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 da.
We started synthetic memories because we saw that there was this false dichotomy between this idea of artificial intelligence being like this dystopian technology that will kill us all, and on the other side, this very naive perspective that AI was a solution for everything. We tried to find a way to actually bring value and help people and create something that could make a positive impact, as well as creating and engaging with the technology in a very critical way. In this case, we were using artificial intelligence from Google. We were exploring how from text we could generate both video and images.
So as Google Arts and Culture, we've been looking at how art and creativity can help enhance health and well-being in a few different ways. And through that research, we came across synthetic memories and domestic data streamers.
We're always looking for ways to make the research more useful for people. And I think this has been an incredible example of how an unexpected way, how the model can be used to improve people's lives. We are giving tools to creators to create new content and recreate experiences. They control what they see and how they want to use what the model outputs.
Okay, so I'm going to stop that there. It just kind of goes on a bit more, but you kind of get the gist of what that project is. And as you saw, that's also in collaboration with Google out of their culture lab in London, UK. So the final piece here goes back to one of the points I made at the very start in terms of kind of having this change in our systems and the change the way that we think about age tech. And the way that we have done that now is I figured, I probably had a moment of boredom and I said, hey, what we need is a new think tank in this area of age tech. And so myself and 9 other colleagues around the world, we established the Age Tech Futures Institute for the whole goal of driving forward now social change when it comes to technology for older adults and the way we care for older adults, and to work with our governments around the world in order to put the right practices and policies in place. So very quickly, this is a think tank where we can think bold, we can think independent, and really kind of be really having this flow of free ideas that help shape the policy and practice in the future of this area. The independent part is really critical. The members that you'll see in a second, we are not there representing our universities. So I'm not there as a professor of University of Toronto. I'm part of this think tank as Alex, so I can speak freely. I can speak my mind based on my 25 plus years experience in this area. And we felt that this is the only way that we can truly identify the real problems and barriers in this area and bring those to light as we move forward. As I said, we are looking at things around, bringing policy up to pace with the innovation that's happening with us, make sure that aging is a global priority, and working on things that equity and ethics are part of these things. Again, I apologize, it says global priority twice. And that we're working with the best and brightest again, who are willing to speak their minds on these things and move things forward. So we're really focusing on 3 areas: policy, education, and partnership. Now, when I say about education, it's not providing courses, but again, developing resources to help support people in public policy and really support cross-sector learning. And then again, facilitating those global collaborations to move scalable solutions forward. So we don't own IP, we're not taking IP, we're not developing technologies in this think tank. We're putting the ideas together and the connections together to help you guys as the researchers in this area and the developers and the startups to do this on your own. So here's the list of initial fellows in this. We are always looking for new people to join us. We had our first meeting last week. We're having our first in-person meeting at the Gerontech Technology Conference in the spring in Vancouver. So we'll all come together and really start setting our platform and agenda. So we're really interested in hearing from people who are really thinking about what the future of AgeTech is as we move forward. So as I said, reach out to me if you have any questions. Check out our website, check out our LinkedIn. We're always posting new things. The more followers we have is better, right? There's power in numbers in this field. And, we're all working towards providing older adults with the best futures possible. And so we need to take different mechanisms and think a bit differently to do that. And with that, I thank you very much. And I think we're doing a bit of a panel chat now. So thanks so much for having me here again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. I think it's really inspiring to have, especially the synthetic memory. I want to recreate those memory I have in the past. So I think many people want to have other questions for sure. So feel free to raise your hand and ask the questions. Oh, yes, please. You can turn on the mic. Yeah.
Hello. Yep. It's just my own interest that it has nothing to do with my academic work because I'm also getting old, right? I have already retired. So your topic really interests me because I kind of like see my future, who is going to take care of me, and in what way. And I'm really glad to know that it's not just the physical care that you people are thinking of. You are also taking care of our psychological need, which is excellent. But I'm still worried about the cost.
Yep.
And who is going to pay. So what is the maybe in Canada, right? You are from Canada, and what's the average cost of taking care of old people, and how is it going to be funded, and how is it funded in Canada, and what would you recommend Hong Kong government for in this regard? I know I don't know if you know, but in Hong Kong, because I used to give care to my parents before they die, and I found that actually there are a lot of different types of help, but the quota is so small that I sometimes have to queue for a month. And it was a very ironical situation that I queue for a rehab bus service. And by the time I get the quota, my mother has already died. So yeah, I think making it available is good, but having the quantity that is sufficient to for the people who are in need is also important, and that comes to really the financial issue.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. And I'm not going to answer all of it because, I'm not a health economist or a political scientist, even though we do work with those individuals, and those people are very important to be part of these teams as we move forward. The average cost of caring for an older person, let's set aside technology, can range, anywhere from, tens of thousands of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Just to give you an
A
example,
year or month?
over the life, depending on how long they live for, right? So let me give you some more specific numbers. So if you need to put the person in a nursing home in Canada, you're probably paying around $7,000 to $10,000 a month, Canadian dollars, for that care. If you happen to be a lucky one that gets into a public care home, it's maybe $3,000 or $4,000. But the waiting list is so long for public health, care facilities, at least in Ontario and Canada. It's just, it's impossible. So the alternative then is home care, right? Home care, again, will range anywhere from, $60 to $100 per hour for care in Canada. That's for in-home care. And again, so it all depends on the number of hours. I know for my mom, we had to bring in a private care, and we were paying probably about $3,000 a month for her care. So it's extremely expensive. Insurance doesn't cover it. The government don't, anyways. So technology is coming down in cost, right? And that's the good thing. 5 years ago, I would have said to you, robots in the home, forget it. They're still too expensive. You can go buy now these toy robots for hundreds of dollars Canadian only that have the same computing that we need to do a lot of this prompting and socialization, et cetera. You can go into your big box electronics store, buy all the smart home systems that you need, for hundreds of dollars Canadian, install them in the house of your loved one, and get the data that you need as well to do it. The problem right now is people don't know what's available and what can be done, right? And, I've always started to say right now, as a research community, is our job to build these technologies, or do we leave that to industry that can do it better, faster, cheaper? And our job is around the education piece, the training piece, the practice and policy aspects to make sure the technologies that these companies make, provide, get them out there. We have the domain expertise, the technology expertise. I know, just speaking for behalf of myself, companies can do it better and quicker, right? Now, if you start to look at technologies that are only hundreds of dollars that can give you the same peace of mind for the most part than having someone go in and check in on mom and dad and whether the stove is off and the door is locked, there's significant savings there to be had. Okay? The final thing I'll say is there's a debate right now in this area, I would say around the world, on whether government should be involved at all in the delivering of technology support older adults or healthcare in general. Because again, you get government involved, the technology price goes up because it has to meet all of their requirements, et cetera. Now, not saying every piece of technology shouldn't go through proper regulation and government channels, but 90% of the technologies we're developing right now for older adults, I would say, are all consumer-based products. Make them available in a store, mass produce them, their costs are going to come down, and at the end of the day, they are going to be more affordable. Now, in those special circumstances of people who cannot afford them, yes, there has to be subsidy programs or full compensation programs from the government that needs to be involved. The final example I'll give is, in Canada, our government will give me a tax credit if I modify my house by putting grab bars in, making the doors wider, building a ramp to make it more accessible. I'll get a tax credit. Fantastic. It's very helpful. But they don't give me a tax credit if I go install a smart home system in my parents' house, or if I install sensors on the stove to make sure a fire doesn't start. None of that is covered. We need to, governments all around the world, I don't know of any government that covers that, really needs to be looking at including things like these technologies within those types of tax credit programs, et cetera. So. I will say the Hong Kong government is way ahead of the Canadian government. A report just came out last week on the state of science and innovation in Canada with healthcare. We are the bottom of OECD countries in science and innovation. So we talked earlier about developing countries in this area. Canada is a developing country in this area. Right? So
True. So I have one follow-up question. So from the perspective, how can we advocate to the government regarding the importance of it, in particular for its customer? So like me, I don't even know unless I go to the exhibition, go to Gerontech technology exhibition, then I know what's happening out there. But apparently there's not too many channels that allow general public to understand what technology is out there, how can I utilize it, what's the price? Do you have any suggestions?
yeah, no, exactly. And so again, this is where industry can come into play by, having more of these products that they're putting out and advertising, that these technologies are not just for, teenagers or whatever. They're also could be used to support older adults, right? We need to do a better job in us in the education field of educating the future occupational therapies, physical therapists, SLPs about these technologies because they're the ones that are eventually going to recommend them for their clients, right? Or recommend them to the families that, hey, have you thought about this device that turns off the stove automatically or locks the door automatically, right? So educating that, and I've been trying that for 25 years in the OT. So I'm an engineer, but I'm a professor in occupational therapy, and I've been trying to push more technology in the curriculum there for 25 years. It's tough to do. Change is slow when it comes to academia. Much slower in Canada probably than here. So I think we need to educate the clinicians. We need to. I brought up the example of the family doctor, and I talked about this in a meeting earlier. The toughest audience I always present to are family doctors, so general practitioners, because they hate this technology for the most part. They come to me and they say, like, "Are you crazy? I don't want my patients coming to me saying their house told them they think they have dementia. I don't want them coming with all this data from their house systems showing it to me, right? So we need to build technology, AI, into medical curriculums as well, right? And we're starting to do that at University of Toronto and various universities as well. I had a meeting yesterday with another university here in Hong Kong that was awarded a new medical school. Again, I won't name names here. But they're talking about AI heavily in their curriculum. So it's the training of the clinicians starting right now, moving forward. That has to happen, right? So
Improve their literacy.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Any other questions?
Back there.
Hello. Oh, hello, Professor. Thank you very much for your inspiring talk. My name is Irina. I'm an occupational therapist myself, and I'm also doing a PhD in AgeTech. So I'd really like to hear from you, from your opinion, when we are designing tech solutions like the 4 projects you shared. Is there a particular framework that you would think it's really important to design when we are developing the process? So for example, in business process, we do have something we call design thinking, right? So in your experience in the age tech or the elderly perspective, is there a particular framework or key elements that we should include? Thank you.
Yeah. Let me start by saying I hate frameworks. But user-centered design, participatory design are 2 key frameworks I would always push in designing AgeTech. Again, so including that user as an equal member of the research team and not just an afterthought, right? So I think that's kind of the core aspect that I would always encourage all the projects to do. And then pulling from other areas, like pulling the design thinking from the business world, pulling different research paradigms from elsewhere. From the OT world, there's the Canadian the Canadian model of occupational therapy, right? The CMOP, occupational performance. Pulling from that, that's very much a design process that you're going through. So, pulling from the different disciplines is always going to be really important. So that's why I encourage frameworks, but I don't encourage just one framework, right? Because it has to be a multidisciplinary approach moving forward.
Right. So I think co-design is very important nowadays. Like talking about involving the users and.
Can I say one thing about that though?
Sure.
Co-design is really important, but pendulums swing both ways, right? And, 10 years ago, co-design did not exist. The pendulum was over here. We didn't talk to older people. We didn't talk to caregivers. The rationale was, well, someone with dementia can't give you anything useful, right? And we slowly discovered that's not true. And we started including them in our design process. But now the pendulum's all the way over here. And we are afraid as experts to do anything in this field without getting the consent and the blessing of our consumer, right? And I see that all the time where people say, well, I'm not going to build this AI model because older adults feel that's not useful to have that feature and function. But this is a feature that may be 5 years down the road. No one's going to know whether it's going to be useful, right? So it has to be a good balance of the two, of listening to our users, including them, but also remembering that at the end of the day, we're the experts in this area. And so we also have to flex our muscles a little bit as well. So that's just a bit of a gripe. So.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Any other questions? Yes, Wiping.
Yes, thank you so much, Alex, for this very inspiring talk. I have 2 points just for discussion because we have so many young people and students here. So yeah, giving like 5 to 10 years, based on all your experience over the years or over decades you have received or experienced. So while we need a lot of technology to support the older adults throughout their remaining time. So which 2 experts you think is most important for us to focus in coming 5 to 10 years?
So, sorry, is the question like what types of technologies?
No matter technology or domain. Okay, so because they may face all different kind of challenges. Yeah.
So I think one is supporting during activities of daily living, right? Once an older adult can no longer take care of themselves, can do their self-care activities, use the toilet independently, that's when typically the decision is made to move them from the home into a care home. So I'd say ADLs, even the most sensitive, embarrassing private ADLs, like using the toilet, wiping themselves after using the toilet, those are the ones that are the critical ones where, you need to focus. The second one is on the family caregivers themselves, right? So we've normally seen the older adult as the customer of our technologies. At the end of the day, it's actually the families, right? It's the families that's making the decision, okay, it's time to take mom and dad out of their home, move them somewhere else, or hey, let's buy this piece of technology that can help us. So you need to focus on the caregivers as well, right? 70% of caregivers suffer from burnout, mental health issues related to the care they're providing. And so if you don't focus now and bring the caregivers and the families more into this, no matter what technology you put into the person's home, if there's burnout on the caregiver's part, then, they're going to be moved out of the home. So.
Thank you so much. Looks that these are very basic needs, but according to your experience, they play an important role. So this is why I think all of us need to think. Okay, sometimes not maybe very fancy thing, but actually this practical thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the funny thing that I've learned, it's the more the basic the task or the need is, the more complex the technology is, right? It's hard to monitor someone if they've wiped their bums after using the toilet, or if they've pulled up their pants after using the toilet, because many cases you see that they don't, and they trip and fall over and break their hip, right? So it's these really basic things that are the tougher challenges.
Thank you so much for this very inspiring point. The second question is, I still remember last time when you gave us a talk here in PolyU, and I'm not sure any of our audience
they're all too young looking,
that actually you mentioned that you declared that the whole slide was how the PowerPoint was made by AI.
Yeah.
Still remember, right?
Yeah.
So now, while you have touched some AI things today, but AI, particularly robots, within even 1 year. So now we have robots working just like human. Okay, so this is rapid evolvement. So what do you see about this in coming again 5 to 10 years, what kind of role, particularly robots, like the task you earlier mentioned, can some robots help? Yeah, what is your insight about it? Thank you.
Yeah, so for those who weren't at that talk last year, I gave a presentation on the role of large language models in the care of older people, and I allowed ChatGPT to write the talk on where it saw itself in the role. It was actually not a bad talk. It had some weird things in it, but so again, 5 years ago, I would still say robots are science fiction. I don't think they are anymore. Again, cost has come down. They've become more, available on the consumer marketplace. So I actually see a large role for robotics in a lot of this stuff, whether it's delivering the cues and the prompts are needed, whether it's, taking physiological measurements about the person to check on their health, et cetera. There's a lot more studies out there that are coming that an embodied presence like a robot is far more effective than a disembodied one, right? So instead of having the prompts coming out of a speaker on the wall, it's more effective to have it coming from something that looks, like something. So I see robots in the next 5 years becoming very, very common in elder care. And again, maybe more in facilities than in personal homes. But again, these like toy robots, these pet robots, et cetera, are starting to see more and more place in people's homes, just purely for companionship and socialization. And I know, that may sound weird. And again, I'm not saying a robot dog should replace, a person going and seeing how their parents are doing. But again, there's gaps in time when we can't be there. And these types of things can fill those gaps as long as they're used correctly and used appropriately, right? The one question that still needs to be answered is how realistic does the robot need to look, right? And there's always that notion of the uncanny valley, right? Things become so real looking, it's scary. And you see a lot of these robots that try to look like real people with the weird kind of skin and the funny looking eyes, and it's not real. And so again, how realistic does a robot need to be in order for that human robot interaction with older adults still to be effective and and happy at the end of the day, right? So.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I agree with that because older adults somehow, when they have dementia, getting older, they start to scare someone, strangers or something. If your robot really looks like a person, they may be really worried about that. I remember I watched a movie called Companion, which is really cool. I watched it on the plane and then talk about a robot actually become like a partner and then start to have a lot of issues afterwards. But I think that's coming.
Yeah, you want to see a good movie about older adults and robots? There's the movie Robot and Frank. Does anyone see that movie?
No.
Anyway, so it's about an older gentleman who has dementia. The family gets him a robot to take care of him. He hates the robot, and then he discovers. I'm not giving away the plot. This is all in the trailer. He discovers the robot can help him rob banks. So it's actually a really good movie about the interaction of seniors with things like robots. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, but also some ethical issues as well.
Oh yeah. And you know what? There's ethical issues in all the technologies we talk about, right? What is less of an ethical concern? A voice coming out of the wall telling you to take your medication, or it coming out of a little robot dog telling you to take your medication, right? It's such a gray area, but the ethics, absolutely, you're right, Arnold. We need to pay a lot more attention to that as we move forward.
Right. Any other question? Oh, yeah, go for it.
Thank you for your presentation. Professor, I used to be an occupational therapist, and now I'm a PhD studying.
You're always once an OT, you're always an OT. You know that, right?
I guess I always OT.
Yeah.
And Professor Zheng is my supervisor. Just to ask you. And the concept of synthetic memories you mentioned is very inspiring. And like what you mentioned, the application was encourage older adults to tell and review their life stories, which has shown positive therapeutic effects on their mood and cognition. So my question is, how do you see this technology evolving from this life review aspect to be applied in the physical domain for prevention and rehabilitation? For instance,
could we synthesize successful movement memories, such as a feeling of walking stability in their younger years, to help rebuild a comprehensive preventive and rehabilitative loop that integrates both psychological and physical dimensions? Thank you.
Who's your supervisor?
YP.
She's smart. That's you've stumped me on that question. Yeah, I guess, in terms of modeling positive behaviors, whether it's, gait, cognitive, mental, can all be a positive thing, right? But honestly, I don't have an answer for you. That's interesting.
Yeah,
If you want to explore that, I'm happy to provide the tool to you to do it. But yeah, hold on to her. She's yeah. Holy smokes. That's a great. I don't have an answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'd love to hear if you have an idea. Yeah, come talk to me. Yeah,
We can talk later.
yeah, absolutely. I'm around for a couple of days, so yeah.
Thank you.
Ooh.
Tough
Can
question.
someone give me an easy question?
Oh, this one.
Right.
Hello. Oh yeah, thank you, Professor, for providing this presentation. I have just encountered a question from the building environment for how does AI bridging the double aging in that terms of the mobility issue.
So how can AI help with mobility issues or?
Yeah, all the public transport side.
Oh, so in terms of public transport,
Yeah, how does AI provide maybe a responsive demand, that kind of system to providing the mobility?
okay, so to keep people active and moving in their communities.
Yeah, maybe AI, how
Yeah. Okay.
to provide mobility issue.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think, AI can be used a lot in terms of helping, people with wayfinding, to get from point A to point B. There's a lot of work happening right now in AI in terms of, autonomous vehicles and things like that that can help get people around. Am I answering your question? Is that the kind of mobility you're talking about?
Like going out, the need of to go to appointment with a friend. Yeah.
Yeah. So AI obviously can help remind people to do those kinds of things. They can, help people even remember, who they're meeting with, right? So for example, we're seeing this a lot now with, smart glasses and things like that, that as I walk up to you, if I have dementia, for example, it'll remind me who you are, remind me some conversation topics, because a lot of older people with dementia sometimes won't go out or go socialize because they're so embarrassed by the fact that they can't remember things like that, right? And that people are going to ask them about their memories, et cetera. So AI can be used to help prompt conversations. It can help to remind them to get out for a walk. But once they're outside the house, again, help with the wayfinding so that they don't get lost, so that they get, make their way back home again. So even these things like these smart glasses and stuff, I also see a lot of potential for that kind of stuff, for those mobility issues when you're not issues, or those mobility tasks of when you're leaving the house, going out into the community, but still need to be having some kind of support, whether it's cognitive support, et cetera. So
Thank you.
So regarding that kind of smart glasses, so is it now available in the market or is still under development? Right?
So probably the most prominent one, at least in North America, are the ones from Meta, right? The Meta glasses that, but that really just does more things like give you information from the internet when you ask for it, takes pictures, et cetera, takes videos. But I've seen other ones as well. Some of them are available as early stage products that do things like facial recognition, right? So as I approach it, says, well, that's Arnold. Arnold works at PolyU. So again, it reminds me of the information which I need right now, totally, because I'm terrible with names. So I think in the next several years, we're going to start to see that type of technology. The technology is already out there, but a lot of the devices are these big, massive, heavy things. Whereas now, the Meta ones are built into glasses that look like mine. And again,
yours now?
no, I don't have the smart ones. But my brother-in-law does, and I saw him for the first time last month, and he's walking around just saying, "Meta, take a picture." Meta taking. I'm like, what the? Well, what are you doing? Who are you talking to?
Yeah.
Because he's not taking out his phone or anything, right? He's just talking to his glasses and he's taking these pictures and videos and stuff, right? And so it's coming. You know, this technology is coming, and those glasses only cost like $400 Canadian, right? You know, yeah, that's more expensive than your regular glasses, but it's not an outrageous price for something that can add that type of intelligence to it, right?
Yes, I remember
Yeah.
a brand actually is a glasses brand. They have it, the camera
Yeah.
embedded and then everything
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
It's not
So-
too bad. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, yep, over there.
Hi, Professor Rivers. Thank you very much for the wonderful talk and also the introduction to your project. But my question is about the introduction of your bottom line principle. You said AI must not replace human care.
Yep.
I'm very interested in how you would rationalize this because generative AI is actually evolving to agent AI, just like you said in the movie.
Yep.
Robot is your partner.
Yeah.
It can help you to make decision and to do actually things.
Yep.
So what do you think the agent AI is going to develop in the field of nursing, healthcare, and also the health aging?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So let me expand it a little bit. AI and these automated systems should only replace human care when human care is not available, right? You know, the smart home is going to look after my parents when I can't be there to look after them, or it's going to call me in when I need to go do something physically. There's going to be certain things that AI robots just are not going to be able to do, right? You're always going to need that human touch with some aspects of care of older people. You know, what we want the technology to do is to let us know when that's going to happen. Ideally, again, predict it and call me in right away. Or again, take care of them and support them and make sure they're safe when I'm at work or I'm here traveling or whatever else it may be, right? I'll give you two examples. So one's a bit of a story, one's an example with my parents. So the story is someone came up to me a few years ago and said, oh, you know, Alex, I finally bought one of those automated pill reminders for my mom. And it reminds her to take her pills and then sends me a text message when she's taking the pill. And I said, well, that's great. So has that changed the dynamic of your relationship? And his answer to me was, yes, it has, but in a positive way. I still call her every morning. But now the first thing out of my mouth is not, Mom, have you taken your pills? Right? It's, I know she's taking her pills because I got the alert. So the first thing I say to her is, hey, Mom, how you doing? I'm finally treating her again like my mother and not a patient, right? That's what technology should do. The most useful smart, so I use my parents' house as a test bed for all the technology. So there's crap everywhere in their house that I put in there. But the most useful one is her smart washer and dryers from LG, right? Because it sends me a text message whenever she turns on the washing machine and washes their clothes and then turns on the dryer to dry their clothes. I know that they do that. She does that every morning on a Saturday at 9 a.m. And if I don't get that alert at 9 a.m. on Saturday that her washer and dryer are being put on, again, I then call them to make sure everything's okay because I'm not getting that prompt. So again, it's filling in gaps of things that I can't monitor all the time. I can't watch over them all the time, et cetera. And, you know, I don't want to have a video camera in the house where I'm always watching the video camera. So that's where, again, the AI, et cetera, comes in to make those decisions of when to call me in, when to support them. And the biggest thing with AI, whether it's in healthcare, elder care, finance, is AI also needs to know its own limitation, right? And that's responsible AI, which is a growing area of work everywhere. So.
Right. I just wonder whether it will be applied to Hong Kong. The reason is because for this kind of AgeTech, so you have a cost, but when compared to having someone like, you know, in Hong Kong, it's very common to hire a Filipino maid or like Indonesian maid. So there, it's not expensive at all. And then they can have human touch, can take care of mom, and then also do everything. So I wonder that will be more regional specific.
Yeah.
Maybe different.
Oh, no, absolutely. Like it is very region specific, right? So Hong Kong, obviously, lot of people, but small area, you can bring in the help as needed. Canada, it's not unheard of that the parents live in Toronto and the children live 4,000 kilometers away in Vancouver and trying to provide support to them, right? So again, technology is playing a role. In terms of Canada, Australia, we have a visitor here from Australia as well that we're talking about. We have very remote locations. In Canada, we have the north, which is very, very remote. So how do you provide support and healthcare to them, where to get to the nearest hospital is a day travel, right? At least.
Yeah.
So again, it depends on the context, depends on the area, and that's why, it's not a one-fit-all solution.
Right.
Right. So
we have to tailor make something in Asia. Any other questions? Oh, yep. Really?
Thank you so much, Alex, for letting us know about these exciting advancements in technology. One question, maybe you could share with us, it's about the data security issue. Apparently, when it involves like technology and there are a lot of data, flowing back and forth. So have you encountered any challenges in this regard when you do when you conduct your 4 projects, and any reminders or tips that you could give us in this regard?
No, absolutely. That's a great question. Thank you. Again, like including your users right from the beginning, you need to include data privacy and security right from the beginning as well. It can't be an afterthought of, okay, well, we've collected all this data. How do we now keep it private and safe? So those principles have to be right up in the front. And, in Canada, we have a privacy commission office, and several years ago, we wrote a document on the privacy by design principles as applied to smart home systems. And again, it lays out, I think 10 principles in terms of to follow to help secure the data from what we call basically from cradle to the grave, right? Because, a lot of times data breaches happen after you even use the system and you've forgotten about it and the data is just sitting there, right? So how do you maintain data privacy and security right from the beginning of the development of technologies to the end of the technology's life cycle and it's trashed and gone? The other thing too, obviously, is there's new techniques in computing and AI that are also helping with this. So typically, right now, you have sensors, you collect it, it's sent to the cloud, it's processed, sent back, and obviously there's all kinds of potential security breaches there. So things like edge computing, right, where all the processing is happening there locally, no need for the cloud. There's a firewall built into it. So there's new techniques, new computing resources that are coming out that allow us now to naturally build that security and privacy into things, right? So again, it's something that is becoming more and more important. And again, we have to learn from other industries, right? So in financial sector, they've been dealing with sometimes not very well, but they've been dealing with security, of data for a long time. We can learn a lot of things from different areas and bring it into our domain as well. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here, right? So.
Oh. So in the middle of the time, we allow one more questions. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so just want to ask the last question. Since Alex, you have been in charge now, earlier AgeWell, now is AgeTech Futures Institute.
Yeah.
So I just want to push to the limit, both to you and to our moderator, Arnold. So just imagine when you get old.
I'm already old. I don't need to imagine YP. I'm already old.
Just want to have some keywords regarding technology supporting you. Okay, give 5 keywords or 5 sentences.
What I want?
Yeah.
Secure. Empathetic. Caring. Easy to use. I know that's several words, but I'll hyphenate it all to make one word. Easy to use.
The sentence is also okay.
And affordable.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Mine's cheap and useful.
Affordable. Okay. The first again, affordable.
Affordability to a new level, Arnold.
Okay, you need 5 keywords.
5 keywords. So cheap, useful, accessible, caring. Somehow I want technology to be caring, as Affordable is cheap already. I'm very cheap.
Seems still for you too far away, so you have not thought about that.
Dementia. The last one. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Just
Thank
for
you
fun.
very
Yeah.
much. So I think everybody wants to ask a lot of questions, but I know Alex will be here for a couple of days. And then at this time, I would like to invite our Director of Hair, Professor Chen, again to present us with the souvenir as well to our conclusions to today's talk.
First, we want to give another round of applause to our speaker.
Thank you.
And also thank Professor Anos Wong for being the moderator. Thank you very much. So to express our appreciation to our speaker, Pierre made a special souvenir for you with your name and the title of the topic. Yeah, and I also wanted to thank everyone for coming to this seminar, and also especially for those who ask questions to make this seminar very meaningful. So Pierre has many seminars and lectures arranged. So the next one will be on the 9th of December. Will be done by Professor Jack Spengler from Harvard School of Public Health. So it's somehow related to today's topic. You are more than welcome to attend. Now the seminar is adjourned. Thank you very much.